I wanted to pick out, too, because you have lots of people in here, including white people, as you said, particularly if it's a white person that's sounding like they might want to say something in their music or entertainment that they're against racism or anything like that. They have had no problem of going after them either with these tactics, but certainly being a lot more brutal with dark folks. I want to pick out two of the subjects that you deal with. The first, Paul Robeson, because I suspect a lot of people wouldn't think of him as being someone who was targeted with this narcotic tactic of neutralizing people. And then, just because I'm in Washington State, I'll pick Jimi Hendrix. Can you give us some details on how drugs were used as weapons against these two individuals?
Yeah, I think they're two of the best examples, so I'm glad you picked them out, Gus, because, well, now, the only difference about Robeson than most of the other people I cover in my book is that there was no attempt to manipulate Robeson to promote drugs first. That was not done with him like most of the other musicians on the cover. But Robeson is probably the clearest example of MK Ultra targeting with psychedelics. So Paul Robeson Jr. is basically laid out in lectures that he's given around the country before he died, just within the last few years. But Robeson Jr. was an adult when his father was in Russia in the Soviet Union in 1961, and it was about several weeks before the Bay of Pigs invasion of Cuba, and Robeson had planned to meet with Fidel Castro and Che Guevara in Cuba, leaders of the Cuban Revolution, and so I think U.S. intelligence was very worried about that. They'd already targeted Robeson in many ways, taking his passport away and things like that. And so here he was in a hotel near the U.S. Embassy in I think it was in Moscow, and there was someone all of a sudden had a hotel room right next to him. Some Americans had a hotel room right next to Paul Robeson and had a big party going on, and convinced him to just to come into the party temporarily. And while he was in the party, somebody gave him a drink, and he just took a sip of it, and all of a sudden was tripping up a storm. His drink had been dosed with a huge amount of either LSD or another psychedelic called BZ. Paul Robeson Jr.'s kind of the last words I heard him say in a speech was that it was LSD, but some other researchers say they think it might have been BZ. Robeson, seems to know best doses. They also dosed him when he went over to see what was going on with his dad, because in '61, Robeson Sr. people didn't know about LSD, and Robeson Sr. thought he was losing his mind. He didn't know why he was feeling that way, and it made him feel somewhat suicidal, and so his adult son comes over to see what's going on with him, and then they dose Robeson Jr.'s drink. And so he's lucky they didn't have a whole lot of it. He said he would have, really been in trouble, but he waited till he came down. He got he got a hold of himself. But meanwhile, they dosed Paul Robeson Sr.'s drinks a few more times at least, and then convinced him to go into a mental hospital to gain, more control of himself, in terms of, he didn't know what was really going on with this. And so he goes to the mental hospital, and then people talk his wife into allowing them to give him electroconvulsive shock treatments at high doses against his will. They gave him 50 ECT treatments and really hurt his brain with both the acid and the super psychedelics and the ECT. And so Paul Robeson decided he just was going to be a recluse after that, because he didn't want to be remembered that way, in history by, someone whose mind was not what it originally was, because he was a brilliant man. I mean, Columbia-trained lawyer, great actor, great, one of the best singers in the world, and and just knew 20 different languages. He was just an amazing man, probably one of the most amazing men in American history. So it's just so sad what, the oligarchy's CIA, MK Ultra program did to him. Now, so do you have any questions about him, though, Gus?
Just again, kind of put that in. I think also he was a big influence on Malcolm X, who also was subjected to some of the same racist neutralization tactics.
Yeah.
But outstanding to get
Yeah.
that information. I learned quite a bit in that project. Context of White Supremacy. Gus T. Renegade in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the system of white supremacy. Today's date, Thursday, October 24th, 2019. So I have been told deadline for the yoga retreat is today. Deposit of $380. You can submit it via PayPal. Drop an email if you would like a physical mailing address. Hoping to see everyone down in Florida. The final portion of $350 is due the second week of December. It's $350 for the final portion. Again, total price is $730 US. 5 days, 4 nights in Florida. Yoga, plant-based meals, counter-racist workshops, and vegan meal workshops. December 28th to January 1. Eat well, use logic. This is our book club. We have a brand new book today. Woo, man, oh man. I think Retired Firefighter was the one who recommended Mr. Gerald Horne, who is a black male professor and author. He's written many, many, many books on racism, white supremacy. His 2016 biography on Paul Robeson. That'll be our new book. If we have folks who would like to pitch in for the narration, other than Retired Firefighter, let us know. You'll be able to share. This is not a big book, so we won't be on it very long. But for the brief period that we are on it, folks can take turns with the narration. That would be awesome. The audio segment we heard at the beginning, that was Mr. John Patash, suspected racist. He's been a guest on the program several times down through the years. In 2016, we discussed his book, Drugs as Weapons Against Us, the CIA's murderous targeting of Students for Democratic Society, Panthers, Hendricks, Lenin, Cobain, Tupac, and other activists. He has a large collage of victims on the front cover, including Dr. Huey P. Newton, Dr. Afeni Shakur, Jimi Hendrix, and Paul Robeson. Actually, the very first person, top left corner, first picture that you would see going left to right is Paul Robeson. And then you heard Mr. Patash give some of the detail that he has in his book about specifically what was done to Paul Robeson. I think Mr. Horne's book will give us some of the reason as to why whites focused so much attention on Paul Robeson. With that, we will get started. Context of White Supremacy. This is Mr. Gerald Horne's Paul Robeson, the artist as revolutionary. Context of White Supremacy, audio segment number 1. Paul Robeson, the artist as revolutionary. Written by Gerald Horne. Chapter 1. The best known American in the world. Paul Robeson, activist, artist, athlete, experienced a dramatic rise and fall, perhaps unparalleled in U.S. history, from consorting with the elite of London society and Hollywood in the 1930s. By the time he died in 1976, he was a virtual recluse in a plain abode in a working-class neighborhood of Philadelphia. What helps to explicate this tragic arc of his life is a fateful decision he made when fascism was rising. He threw in his lot with those battling for socialism and decided to sacrifice his thriving artistic career on behalf of the struggle against Jim Crow or U.S. apartheid. He was a forerunner of the likes of Malcolm X and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In fact, one cannot begin to understand the lives and trajectories of those two men without considering Robeson. Like Malcolm, he was a militant. A turning point in his dramatic fall was when he confronted President Harry S. Truman face to face in the White House, berating him
because of the lynching of African Americans and Washington's lassitude in confronting the same. However, because Robeson was multilingual and lived abroad for years, he was able to develop a global appeal that dwarfed what the Muslim minister only sought to accomplish in the final months of his life. Like Dr. King, he had a mass appeal among African Americans, but unlike this Nobel laureate, Robeson was not only an artist whose performances stirred emotions and fealty worldwide, he was also allied with a then rising socialist left and allied trade unions, both of which too had global ties, providing this performer with a reach that even Dr. King at his height found difficult to match. The argument of this book is that you cannot fully appreciate how the Jim Crow system came to an end without an understanding of the life of Paul Robeson. Robeson pioneered the struggle against Jim Crow throughout the 1930s and 1940s. It was only with Robeson's fall that King and Malcolm could emerge as they did. The undermining of Robeson created a vacuum that these two leaders filled. It was early 1952, and legions from Nelson Mandela's African National Congress were on the march in Johannesburg. But what struck the journalist covering this anti-apartheid demonstration was the singing voice pouring forth from loudspeakers as thousands strode forcefully. It was Paul Robeson's. This was an act of defiance in that the authorities there had banned his recordings as early as 1949. They sing their songs of protest, chortled Robeson then, including some of mine, may I modestly add. The novelist Howard Fast wrote with accuracy during this era that there is no child in Eastern Europe who cannot sing you one of the favorite songs of Paul Robeson. Yet another journalist striding through Jerusalem a few years later was struck to hear Robeson's voice emerging from the window of a sidewalk abode. In 1957, Robeson's wife commented that his records are played regularly by popular demand over the BBC, over national networks, and in public places in Europe, the Soviet Union, China, in Asia, and Africa. A friend told us only a few days ago that he had been in a supermarket in Mexico recently and heard Paul singing Old Man River. 2 years later, Nobel laureate Pablo Neruda ecstatically told Robeson that the whole people of Chile love you. But his homeland was not alone, since Peru, Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil were of a like mind. Everywhere you are admired, he insisted. Less than a decade later, in 1968, Robeson's birthday was celebrated widely in China and, it was said, deemed to be an event of major international significance, not simply because of his socialist beliefs, but because his artistry ranked him alongside Caruso and Chopin as a singer. Born in 1898, Paul Leroy Robeson, a descendant of enslaved Africans in the U.S., was globally renowned not just as a singer, but as an actor and athlete and political activist. As a singer and actor, he was as celebrated as Michael Jackson and Denzel Washington would be. As an athlete, he was as illustrious as Mario Balotelli. As an activist, he carried the moral weight of Nelson Mandela. He was probably the most famous living Negro, said the Tribune of the U.S. elite, Time magazine in 1943. No, said an admiring reporter in 1964, upping the ante, as he termed him, the best-known American in the world. The more reserved Nobel laureate Linus Pauling calling him simply one of the greatest men of the 20th century. The more reserved New Statesman said in 1936, he is one of the most impressive actors alive. Coretta Scott King, the widow of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., was one among those acclaiming him upon his death in 1976, calling him one of the finest artists, most brilliant minds, and greatest champions of human rights that has lived in this century. The Trinidadian intellectual C.L.R. James, who collaborated with him on a remarkable play in London about the Haitian Revolution, asserted in 1983, "I do not believe that any human being in the 20th century achieved the worldwide fame and recognition that Paul Robeson did." The top American football coach, Lou Little, said of Robeson, "There has never been a greater player in the history of football. Robeson's skills on the gridiron were so advanced and involving, as it did hand-to-hand combat and fancy footwork, that he was seriously approached to fight then heavyweight boxing champion Jack Dempsey." An acquaintance of Gene Tunney, the man who had bested Dempsey in the ring, recalled his saying that the next heavyweight boxing champion of the world could be, if he wanted it, a young man named Paul Robeson. The razor-sharp reflexes of this burly 6'3" Robeson, whose weight was well above 230 pounds, convinced boxing promoters that he would have acquitted himself well in the ring. Similar qualities he possessed, cat-like quickness combined with muscular brute force, also allowed Robeson to state credibly and modestly, "I was pretty good at basketball." Yet, it was left to Robeson's comrade, the father of Pan-Africanism, W.E.B. Du Bois, who in the 1950s called Robeson, without doubt, the best-known American on earth, in that his voice is known in Europe, Asia, and Africa, in the West Indies, and South America, and in the islands of the seas. Children on the streets of Peking and Moscow, Calcutta, and Jakarta greet him and send him their love. Yet, with all this, there was a reigning anomaly. Only in his native land is he without honor and rights. The reason was simple. After U.S.-USSR relations plummeted post-1945, Robeson refused to join the consensus. His view was that just as the two powers collaborated against the ultra-right from 1941 to 45, this engagement should continue thereafter in pursuit of the apartheid backers at home and abroad, and the colonialists too, while Washington did not agree. But Robeson was part of a larger African-American consensus. His 19th century African-American predecessor as a preeminent tragedian and interpreter of Shakespeare, Ira Aldridge, who fled the U.S. and became a British subject, also felt more comfortable in Russia. It was his second homeland, says his biographer, probably because, like Eastern Europe generally, where he too spent a considerable amount of time, there they were not interested in perpetuating the vestiges of African slavery, the normalized pattern in the U.S. The intersection of U.S. Jim Crow laws, or apartheid, with Robeson's globetrotting, which introduced him to sharply diverging realities, also played a role in his persecution. Typical of American artists, he observed in 1963, "I had to go abroad to really make it on the big time, and it was abroad that he encountered a new world." I found little color prejudice in Spain, in the Scandinavian countries, and none at all in the Soviet Union. Naturally, this freedom from color consciousness attracted me and still does. But this attraction infuriated many in his homeland, where finding anything positive to say about Moscow was seen as being not only improper and immoral, but perhaps a sign of mental derangement. Moreover, Robeson refused to cut his views to fit prevailing fashion. "I'm a Marxist," he told a New Zealand journalist in 1960. "I'm a convinced socialist," he informed an Australian questioner during the same year. "I'm a radical," he said earlier, "and I am going to stay one until my people get free to walk the earth." More to the point, his close comrade, William Patterson, declared Paul Robeson was a revolutionary determined to deploy his immense talent on behalf of constructing a socialist commonwealth, not just in the U.S., but worldwide. The problem for Robeson was that his homeland was at the tip of the spear during the Cold War and felt compelled to repress vigorously those like Robeson who refused to accede. Nobel laureate and longtime Londoner Doris Lessing observed that even the worst time of the Cold War in Britain was mild compared to the United States. No British communist was ever treated with the harshness the American government used towards Paul Robeson and some other American communists. Pete Seeger, the famed folk singer, who too was persecuted in the U.S., told Robeson directly that "you have been the most blacklisted performer in America." Like many African American artists before and since, Robeson attained widespread popularity in Europe, then leveraged this lionizing back home and then worldwide. Negro artists have always gained a fine and welcome appreciation in Europe, said the Jamaican writer Claude McKay, and especially England, rather than the United States. What catapulted Robeson to prominence, first as an artist, then as a politico, was a lengthy sojourn in London, which began in the 1920s and may have lasted to his dying days but for the onset of war in 1939, though he visited frequently thereafter. It was in 1960 that he informed an inquiring New Zealander that, "So, for any views I have, Britain must take the responsibility, not America and not Russia." Robeson was alluding to the fact that a turning point in his life occurred in London in 1928 when he met and was influenced by Shapurji Saklavala, a Parsi born in Bombay and one of the first communists to be elected to parliament. He learned about socialism not from Maxim Gorky, the famous Soviet writer, but George Bernard Shaw, the famous British writer. "My whole social and political development," he confided in 1958, "was in England, and I became as much a part of English life as I now am of American. You'll have to blame Britain for my political views," he reminded an interviewer in Melbourne, "since it was there that I became an advocate of socialism." He learned about the devastation of colonialism in London too, from similarly impeccable sources, as he and his spouse befriended the leaders of the liberation movement of British India. It was in 1931 that Eslanda Robeson conferred with M.K. Gandhi. He said he felt the Negro and the Indian had a lot in common, was her apt summary. What was true for Robeson was similarly true for many of his U.S. counterparts. That is, in a dialectical fashion, Britain had become a leading colonizer and imperialist nation and simultaneously produced some of the sterner critics of these systems of exploitation. It was in 1936 in Manhattan when Robeson's close comrade, the black communist Ben Davis, who was to be elected subsequently to the New York City Council representing Harlem, encountered his good friend Robeson, was splayed across the bed reading a foundational work by British communist intellectual Emil Burns. It was true that he read Marx and Lenin in German and Russian, and that he was impressed with a Soviet constitution that pledged anti-racism, but the fact is that Robeson and a good deal of the U.S. left were heavily dependent upon the insight and research of their UK counterparts, including Rajani Palm Dutt, whom Robeson deemed to be one of Britain's leading Marxist thinkers. This lengthy list also included Maurice Dobb, Maurice Cornforth, J.D. Bernal, J.B.S. Halden, Christopher Caldwell, Christopher Hill, Harry Pollitt, et al. This is not to mention premier intellectuals from British colonies, for example, Eric Williams of Trinidad, nor the British who migrated to the U.S. and became leaders of the left, for example, the dangerous Scott John Williamson. Indeed, though Robeson denied more than once that he was a member of the U.S. Communist Party, his closeness to London comrades raises questions rarely asked, hardly answered definitively, as to whether he was ever a member of the party in Great Britain, more of a likelihood than U.S. membership. I discovered Africa in London, said Robeson, which profoundly influenced my life, referring to his subsequent political commitments and his meeting there such leading figures as Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya, and Nnamdi Azikiwe of Nigeria. I spent many hours talking with them and studied the languages of these nations, including Yoruba, Efik, and Ashanti. It was in London that he discussed Africa with men like H.G. Wells and Harold Lasky and Jawaharlal Nehru. His interest was so intense that British intelligence came one day to caution me about the political meanings of my activities. But tellingly, his discovery of Africa in London was tied inexorably to his other preoccupation, socialism. It was an African in London, he noted later, who directed my interest in Africa to something he had noted in the Soviet Union. On a visit to that country, he had traveled east and had seen the Yakuts, a people who had been classed as backwards race by the czars, in a manner not unlike what had befallen Africans in, for example, North America. He had been struck by the resemblance between the tribal life of the Yakuts and his own people of East Africa, leading Robeson to think that socialism, too, could uplift Africa. So, concluded Robeson, through Africa I found the Soviet Union. Robeson and Nehru met in London in the 1930s, and the Indian leader was so moved by his presence that he penned an ode to him, informing readers that "You have been the voice of man, the song of germinating earth, and the movement of nature." This homage was a reflection of the fact that Robeson's signature song, Old Man River, was adapted into several South Asian languages, with often the Mississippi River transmuted to the Ganges. The British Barbadian observer Peter Blackman was agog in describing the rapturous reception of Robeson before his forced departure in 1939. He has always been popular in England. In 1939, I attended a meeting in a working-class district of London at which he sang. The crowds in the streets, an inspector of police told me, were bigger than any that used to turn out to see Edward VIII when the monarch was at the height of his popularity at Prince of Wales. Cabinet members
bid discreetly for interviews, members of Parliament and hall porters alike jostle one another to shake his hand. While the bulk of the audiences he entertains are middle and working class folk, yet even with halls packed, thousands are turned away. After the U.S. in the 1950s rejected his right to travel and sought to ruin his livelihood, Robeson fought an ultimately successful battle that led him to tell British readers in 1960, "It was largely due to pressure from this country that I eventually got my passport. That's why I make my temporary home here." There was a mutual love affair between Robeson and Britain to the point where at one juncture he considered relinquishing his U.S. citizenship and adopting British nationality instead, a path chosen earlier by Ira Aldridge and numerous other African Americans in previous centuries and decades. As one analyst put it, Robeson was adored in Britain. No other country in the world did so much to keep Robeson in the public eye during his long containment by the U.S. authorities, and no other country did as much to protest his treatment. In 1973, at a time when solidarity with Robeson was designed to bring a rebuke from Washington, Labor Party stalwarts who saluted him included Harold Wilson, Dennis Healy, Tony Benn, Jim Callahan, and Roy Jenkins. Robeson was popular in Britain, the springboard for his global acclaim, not least because he was deeply knowledgeable about British culture. Gaelic was among the many languages he studied. As early as 1938, the Scotsman reported that he had a working knowledge of Gaelic, but what made Robeson unique was that he strived to connect national streams of culture to an all-encompassing global culture. "When I was in Scotland," said Robeson, "I was reminded of how near the Gaelic folk songs are close to our own. When I sing them, I feel they express the same soulful quality that I know in Negro music. Indeed, they contributed no small part to the development of our music, and the Gaelic-speaking Negro was not uncommon in the southern states 2 centuries ago." Likewise, Robeson found a close kinship between the Negro music and the music of Ireland. Thus, when interviewed by the Glasgow Herald in 1960, he sought to discuss the affinity between Hebridean songs and the Chinese, African, and Hungarian folk songs, all of which were part of the pentatonic mode. Robeson found a great likeness of many of the African languages in monosyllabic base in use of tone to the Chinese-Tibetan languages, the similarity in structure of many of the East African languages to the Hungarian, Finnish, Turkish, Japanese family of languages. Also, the likeness of philosophical concepts, of concrete ways of thought, and in many cases, similar art aesthetic between and among diverse language groups. He compared the curved form of the Ashanti with those of the Chinese and the basic aesthetic similarity. He had the pleasure and privilege to sing many of these lovely melodies in Scotland, in Glasgow, Edinburgh, Aberdeen, Dundee, Perth, etc., and was taken by the likeness of the Hebridean chants and folk songs to Afro-American music, lovely Hebridean melodies such as Kishmool's Galley and the Skyboat Song, Risque Love Lilt, all exemplary of the mutual influences of different musics upon the other, which demonstrated the essential unity of the human race. For Robeson, language was not just a tool of communication, but also a way to forge a deeper connection with social and political consequence. The U.S. Embassy in Paris took note when in 1958 he informed a communist journalist of the singer's belief that the different musical expressions of all countries are but so many inseparable links in the same chain, and he demonstrates this relationship vocally
to La Humanites correspondent by comparing a Negro spiritual with a selection from Boris Godunov. The film I was most proud to make, he told the BBC in 1960, was Proud Valley, the story of a Welsh mining village. Much of it was made in the Rhondda Valley, and the director was Pen Tennyson, a direct descendant of the great poet. I was brought up on English ballads, not Negro spirituals as was thought. It was English ballads I used to sing. Initially, I knew dozens of them. They earned me my first recognition as a singer. Decades of attention to the so-called special relationship between London and Washington notwithstanding, Robeson had tapped into a long-standing current of sympathy between African Americans and Britons that stretched back to the founding of the U.S., when the enslaved generally sided with the redcoats, not least because of the gathering abolitionism in the UK and the slave-holding status of the victorious rebels. This trend continued in the 19th century when leading U.S. abolitionists, for example, Frederick Douglass, were frequently to be found in London, Dublin, Cardiff, and Edinburgh. Robeson exemplified this trend when, in 1958, he acknowledged openly that the relentless, powerful, compelling factor is the pressure of world opinion against racism in the United States. It was beyond the shadow of a doubt, he thundered, that the United States cannot afford to ignore the pressure that comes from abroad. It was in 1937 that the then affluent Robeson funded the Council on African Affairs, a U.S.-based grouping that crusaded for decolonization of Africa and the Caribbean, with the belief, in large part, that as this beleaguered continent and region were liberated, citizens there could then pressure Washington to liberate African Americans in turn. Repeatedly over the years, Robeson, according to his close friend and biographer Lloyd Brown, adjudged the CAA the one organizational interest among many with which he was identified and that was closest to his heart. Robeson exemplified these bold words when, in 1950, he collaborated with Patterson in filing a petition with the United Nations charging Washington with genocide against African Americans. Part of what made Robeson a revolutionary was his rejection of narrow nationalism and his uplifting of a radical internationalism, and it was this, as much as anything else, that caused the tremendous persecution of him by the U.S. authorities, since he was effectively eroding Washington's sovereignty in pursuit of racial equality domestically and the socialist commonwealth globally that would guarantee it. Seamlessly, Robeson argued that as reflected in their art and culture, and music particularly, humanity was one which undergirded why he thought humankind was destined for a unified socialist commonwealth. He paid a steep price as a result. His income dwindled from a hefty $104,000 in 1947 to $2,000 or so a year shortly thereafter as the Red Scare deepened. Paul Robeson was born on 9 April 1898 in New Jersey. A mere 48 hours after his birth, the U.S. moved to declare war on Spain and Cuba. Puerto Rico and the Philippines were seized from Madrid, and the Hawaii Kingdom was overthrown during the same period. This evolution of U.S. imperialism, this bringing under U.S. rule so many described as colored, exacerbated the white supremacy whose slaying became a preoccupation of the mature Robeson. His father, the Reverend William D. Robeson, was born in North Carolina in 1845, but in 1860 escaped from enslavement, and then attended Lincoln University in Pennsylvania. In 1878, he married Mary Louisa Bastille, whose family traced their ancestry as far back as 1608. Princeton, where the couple settled and where Paul was born, was spiritually located in Dixie, Robeson recalled later, with the decaying smell of the plantation big house. It was a Jim Crow, meaning apartheid, town. The grade school that I attended was segregated, and Negroes were not admitted in any high school. Of course, they were barred from Princeton University, whose president, Woodrow Wilson, went on to occupy the same position in Washington, where he heightened the apartheid practice there and nationwide, over which he had presided in New Jersey as governor. Robeson was a feisty child, a trait displayed not long after he was born. Decades later, one visitor to his home back then recounted to him a rather vivid recollection of you as you were then, for while asleep on the couch in the living room, you marched up to it and yanked my hair to wake me. Your mother had placed me there because I had a headache, which hardly ceased after this abrupt end to her resting. Robeson's parents produced 6 progeny, 5 sons and a daughter, but the turning point for young Paul came in 1904 when his mother, a near invalid, was fatally burned in a household accident, leaving an emotional void for this now motherless child. The Bissett family moved from Princeton in 1907 and wound up in a neighboring Somerville. This change in environment accentuated his always close relationship with his surviving parent, whose example left a deep and lasting impression upon him. As with the son, Robeson described his father as having the greatest speaking voice I have ever heard, a deep, sonorous basso, richly melodic and refined, vibrant with the love and compassion which filled him. Another turning point for young Robeson came in 1908 when he disobeyed his father, who then chased him, fell, and, as the still startled son described years later, knocked out one of his most needed teeth. I shall never forget my feeling, he recalled. It has remained ever present. Never in all my life afterwards did he have to admonish me again. This respect became a source of tremendous self-discipline, which has lasted until this day, he said as he approached the age of 60. What would Pop think? This became his mantra, his command, his guiding light. Robeson later told the vast BBC audience that the Christmas holidays in my childhood were not so happy because I usually spent them with neighbors or cousins while my father had to go to other towns to preach. I used to feel that I was an outsider, never quite one of a family. My mother died when I was 6, but I remember one Christmas morning going into church and a certain song made a deep impression on me and cheered me up quite a bit. The song was, "Get on Board, Little Children." This positive paternal influence proved to be exceedingly helpful for, as he stated bluntly, I grew up in extreme poverty. At the tender age of 12, he was working in Rhode Island in posh, racially segregated hotels. He was scrubbing floors. Nevertheless, such drudgery was not the trademark of his youth. I was brought up, he stressed, in a vocal household, in that my father was the finest public speaker I have ever heard. Thus, in my home, all through childhood, we orated, recited, debated, or just spoke for fun. With the single exception of my sister, we all belonged to debating teams in grade school, high school, and college. As Robeson saw it, Negroes have what I call melodic speech. This is particularly true of Negro preachers. They chant, intone, orate, sing, talk, moving naturally and freely from one plane to another, just as Robeson did, from singing to declaiming to acting, and this upbringing shaped his talent. Some playwrights have been interested in melodic speech, particularly Shakespeare and Eugene O'Neill. If you change around the words of their lines, you will often lose the music, the rhythm, the color, and the impact of the line. Robeson, who began appearing before audiences at the age of 8, in Sunday school, in my father's church, on debating teams, and in glee clubs, had multiple opportunities to exercise his supple vocal cords. It was in 1914 as a student that he first performed the lead role in Othello, the first of many triumphs in this tragedy. Still, at the age of 17, in his final year of high school, he had no vocation in mind. But then, in 1915, he won a statewide oratorical contest, adumbrating his future by speaking eloquently of the great founding father of Haiti, Toussaint L'Ouverture. Citing the immortal words of the abolitionist Wendell Phillips, Robeson declaimed in words that were to define his future: "When I want to find the vanguard of the people, I look to the uneasy dreams of an aristocracy and find what they dread most." Apparently, studying held no dread for Robeson, for he was admitted as a scholarship student to Rutgers University in New Brunswick, New Jersey, a leading institution. Until 1915, only 2 African Americans had ever attended this school, even though it was supported by taxpayer dollars, a good deal of which were contributed by African Americans. As it turned out, he was the only Negro there during his 1915-1919 tenure. The resonant speaking voice he had developed, which became his hallmark as a singer and actor, developed further at Rutgers. Subsequently, he described to the BBC that during his time there, he would bicycle to Somerville, about 15 miles away, where his father had a pastorate. At times, the Reverend Robeson would invite a so-called revivalist minister to address the congregation, who was known for his impassioned declamation. "One Sunday," said Robeson, "I was in the church talking about the relative positions of science and religion. I prided myself on being pretty level-headed," he confided, "but a revivalist minister who was in the church looked at me and came and stood over me, menacingly. Before you knew it," continued the budding materialist, "I'm on my knees praying, and within a half an hour I'm walking down the aisle, just as you've seen them at Billy Graham's meetings, speaking of the notorious evangelist." But that is not all he took away from his close contact with religionists, for he said, "As the son of a minister, I heard a great deal of Bach's music in my youth, and as I grew up, I learned to love his music." It was his father who, in a moving experience, said Robeson, who chose to teach me in Hebrew from the Bible. It was in college that he embarked on his abiding preoccupation, languages, beginning with Greek and Latin. "In my college days," said Robeson later, "Latin and Greek and language study generally became his constant companion. I was quite a Greek scholar," he said. "I enjoyed learning languages." And this intellectual interest dovetailed with a political imperative. "I believe," he said in 1963, "that there was, way back, one language, one music, one people." And what made Robeson such a unifying, global, and revolutionary figure was that this profundity he articulated was embodied in his own person. However, he not only displayed facility with foreign languages. During the height of his popularity, the Californian communist leader, Dorothy Healy, escorted him to an all-Negro party and was surprised to find that upon arrival he
immediately began using black English colloquialisms in this crowd in a way he never had when I was with him in groups of whites. Those attending a gathering in Los Angeles of the left-leaning Progressive Party, which Robeson chaired, were taken aback when he spoke for 10 minutes in fluent Spanish to those of Mexican origin in attendance. The versatile Robeson reputedly had a better understanding of Chinese than he did of Spanish. Besides music and language, the youthful Robeson also developed a keen interest in sports. During his first year in college, he sought to join the American football team, which brought a sharp introduction to racist violence. One boy slugged me in the face and smashed my nose, just smashed it, he said with equal amounts of wonder and anger. The injury provided trouble to me as a singer every day since, he lamented. And then, when I was down, flat on my back, another boy got me with his knee and fell on me. He managed to dislocate my shoulder. But in an early lesson that buoyed him throughout life, his sainted father convinced him not to quit, since he should see himself as not just an individual, but also as a representative of all Negroes. So I stayed, said Robeson. I had 10 days in bed, a few days at the training, and then out for another scrimmage. I made a tackle and was on the ground, my right hand palm down on the ground. A boy came over and stepped hard on my hand. He meant to break the bones. The bones held, but his cleats took every single one of the fingernails off my right hand. That's when I knew rage, he added with lingering vehemence, and it was that rage that he converted into doggedness that propelled him into one of the best athletes ever to compete in this blood sport. Thus, on the next play, it seemed as if the whole team came at me. I swept out my arms, and the 3 men running interference sought to block him, but instead went down because of a legal blow administered by the now enraged Robeson. I wanted to kill, he said triumphantly, and I meant to kill, said the proponent of self-defense. But the coach intervened. This display of aggression was at a practice session directed at teammates, yet even this exhibition of violence hardly prepared him for actual games against opponents. After one brutal match in 1918, Samuel Rosen, who came to know Robeson, lingered near the entrance to the stadium, and soon everyone but Robeson had departed. He walked along down the long corridor toward the exit, said the distressed observer. Not a soul with him. He was completely abandoned by his teammates. The touched Rosen concluded, it was the first time that I really understood what it meant to be black. Then there was the game with Washington and Lee University, a Virginia school named after 2 preeminent slaveholders. Naturally, their team not only had no black players, but also refused to play any team that did. So the coach benched the angered Robeson, and the team suffered, unable to prevail. Yet, of the sports he played, including basketball, baseball, and track and field, in all of which he excelled superbly, he confessed that American football was his favorite. Perhaps it was because of the roughhouse tactics which toughened him helpfully for the future battles that endeared him, though in basketball too, a reporter noticed that every time he was near the basket, at least 2 of the opposing players were on top of him, and inexorably he was knocked down. Robeson's sterling success on athletic battlefields unsettled the rudiments of white male supremacy, paving the way for desegregation. What steeled Robeson for future battles was not only his preparation on athletic battlefields, but as well the shock of the death of his father on 17 May 1918. Robeson was heartbroken. According to his future spouse, he became quieter, more thoughtful, lonely. Fortunately, his college years were not consumed by racist violence and personal setbacks. His professor in English literature was an authority on Shakespeare. He became my dearest friend among the professors, said Robeson. It was he who brought me to New York to see my first Shakespearean play. Robeson was impressed. I remember to this day, he said years later, the clarity of their diction, which then compelled him to take courses in phonetics at London University. This interest in Shakespeare merged effortlessly with his interest in music and his acculturation in the church. Get some of the records of the divine Mahalia Jackson, he counseled later, or listen to the poetic bard-like songs of Ledbetter, Leadbelly, or Sonny Terry. This bardic tradition, he advised, goes back to the land of our African forebears. Today, in any of our churches, one can hear the preacher, leader, and chorus congregation creating a kind of modal, antiphonal, or polyphonic contrapuntal singing reminiscent of an African chant. These bard-like songs and chants are similar to those of Scotch Hebridean bards and the Welsh bards of Druid tradition and the Irish bards who inspired Sean O'Casey and the unknown singers of the old Russian Balinia, the bards of Icelandic and Finnish sagas, the ancient singers of American Indian lore, the bards of the Vedic hymns of the India of the East, of the Chinese singer-poets, the Hasidim, et al. The essence of Robeson's life work and the heart of his socialist credo was his fervent belief that humanity was one, all marching, albeit at different speeds, to the same goal. The seeds of this cultural expansiveness were sown in college. His intellectualism was reflected in his grades, receiving an A, or excellent, in public speaking and the history of art. He graduated from Rutgers with honors, inducted into the prestigious Phi Beta Kappa, a fraternity of the academic elite, and signaling his future course, gave an address in Brooklyn on the New Idealism. His senior thesis, an adroit examination of U.S. constitutional law calling for equal protection under the law, prefigured his subsequent admission to the law school at Manhattan's Columbia University, where his tuition was paid in no small measure by his laboring part-time as a professional American football player. On a hill overlooking Harlem, which had recently witnessed an influx of migrants from Jamaica, Barbados, and the region once known as the British West Indies, this Ivy League school both was influenced by and stood apart from its teeming neighborhood. For decades to come, Robeson would be shaped by the urban nodes that were London and New York, and it was the latter that first left a deep impression upon him. Harlem has been the scene both of wonderful moments of happiness and achievement and some of the bitterest experiences of my life, he later recounted. I can remember walking along 7th Avenue in an old army overcoat, wondering if I would ever be able to afford to clothe myself respectably. I have been broke in Harlem, gone without food in Harlem, and looked for work in Harlem. It was at the Polo Grounds that I played my first football games, and each time I passed 155th Street and Edgecombe Avenue, where it had been cited, a lump comes in my throat. It was in Harlem, in the early hours of the morning, I listened awestruck to the deep laughter and wit of Bert Williams, the comic actor of Bahamian origin. It was that great master, when Robeson was still toying with becoming an attorney who gave him a pat on the shoulder and words of encouragement, steering a bewildered young actor to fame and fortune. I can still remember humming the last strings of Little Gal, that lovely song of Rosamond Johnson's set to the words of Paul Laurence Dunbar, the poet laureate of Black America, and then rushing from the old plantation room into the subway train at 50th Street and Broadway. There, just across the aisle, was dear Florence Mills, the simple, nightingale-voiced star, and how proud I was when she too gave me a nod and a smile of recognition. I recall with profound respect and admiration the evenings with James Weldon Johnson reading his fervent poems. A reference to the acclaimed diplomat, human rights leader, and lyricist. An indelible impression was made on Robeson by a short, never-to-be-forgotten chat with that great scholar and tireless fighter, W.E.B. Du Bois. While a student at Columbia, Robeson would stroll northward to Lewisohn Stadium during hot summer nights. There, he could hear the New York Philharmonic at reasonable prices and be influenced by their superb musicianship. Harlem was to remain dear to Robeson to his dying days. It was where his funeral was held in 1976, but the kind of encouragement he received from other stellar figures there served to ensure that he would reciprocate, befriending other up-and-coming artists when he too reached this elevated stage, which was to occur rather shortly.
Context of White Supremacy. That is the first audio semester, Gerald Horne, Paul Robeson, the artist as revolutionary. So we were able to comfortably begin at the conclusion of chapter 1. So we'll start the second audio segment on chapter 2. If you have thoughts, questions you would like to share, dial 605-313-551-664. The code 5664943#. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. That number again, 665-313-551-664. The code 5664943#. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Was checking while I was giving out the number to make sure that I can indeed search for racism in this book quite a few more times than we talked about yesterday. Suspecting racist Colin Good, but that is another story, another book. If you have questions, feel free to dial in. Also, you can drop an email until justice@gmail.com. You can share your thoughts and observations as we proceed. I'm not sure how informed people are about Mr. Robeson. His life works, what he intended to do, but I reckon it's a good to fill in some of the gaps that is in case. We did start with the audio segment John Potash. That was from 2016 in the C.O.W.S. archives. That might be important. Keep that in mind as we're reading. That he was, I would say that's connected to biological warfare, yes. Him being drugged with some sort of brain damaging chemical that permanently changed the trajectory of his life. He conducted himself, became kind of recluse, couldn't think well. That is super important for many reasons. Super important. In fact, I'll just get this in quickly and shut my mouth. I say it's important because I had such a full day today. I'm so tired. So I did the narration for this. So I did the narration. Short notice to figure out what we were going to read. Was able to get all the narration today. Normally, if I do the narration, I try to break it up over a week or so. Get it done today. Well, I did the first portion of it. I stopped to go get CPR certification. You can't be a yoga instructor without getting CPR certification. So I do the first recording of the audio. We go to do my CPR certification. You know, the dummy. You have to do all the compression. They have to do all that. But the reason I'm talking about drugging and biological warfare. The so-called opioid crisis, dog food, that is so massive that has changed the way that they teach CPR. We had a whole segment that was just on responding to someone who might have overdosed from some sort of opioid, what not to do. She said, oh yeah, some sort of powder substance, or really any sort of evidence that looks like this person might be down, it might be an overdose. Be careful, because it's fentanyl mixed in the substance. You can touch it. It's absorbed through your skin, and if it's fentanyl in it, it could kill you. She said it has killed other children who never responded. Enforcement officers and other people, when they touched it, know what it was, and bang, they had to see paraphernalia or anything like that. Don't touch it. Could damage you, kill you. And I just, wow. That is amazing. It is changing, literally changing the way that we teach CPR, learn CPR, because the number of whites killing themselves, dying, overdose, opioid, as they call them. That's that thing that did come to mind when hearing about Paul Robeson going back and being drug chemical biological warfare. They have lots of different ways of carrying that out. Any that in mind is chemical and biological warfare against Paul Robeson specifically. And I'm gonna check. I have back here with the section on Paul Robeson, so I can share directly as we move along. Oh, found it all. The picture right there. I'll share if I find details from that also. Folks have dialed in, and you have comments, questions to share. The line should be open. Feel free.
Can I be heard, Cuz?
First.
Greetings, Gus. I just wanted to inform you that they're messing with your sound again. You're like very muffled, like you were basically you're inaudible. We can barely make out anything that you're saying. But I did want to say that I was totally shocked by the portion of the segment when you played John, the segment before the reading about all of the torture that Paul Robeson had to go through being experimented on through the MK Ultra program, and what they basically deneutralized him by making him they caused him to not even be able to function like he used to. That was a way, I guess, for them to shut him up. But I just think that was terrible what they did to him. And I'm enjoying the beginning of the book. It's very interesting about his life story. I really, I'm still trying to learn about him. I didn't know that much about him, so this book will definitely be giving me an opportunity to learn a lot more about him. And thank you so much for taking my call, and I will mute my line.
Much obliged. Am I still muffled, or is it not coming through?
You sound
You're clear now.
Oh, okay.
You sound good. Yes, sir.
That is wacky. Must be a headset issue. Thankfully, I didn't say too much. That's be another good reason why I don't do live readings. I said briefly, I will repeat really quick the CPR portion that I talked about. I said I pulled out drugs as weapons against us. That was where we started at with the audio segment for today's broadcast. And I said, wow, it has been a full day. I got up and I read the first portion of the audio. I paused. I went to get my CPR certification. You can't teach yoga in studios without being CPR certified. Went to get my CPR certification, and apparently the number of whites who are killing themselves from the opioid overdose situation, dog food, is so astronomical that it has changed the way that they teach CPR. We had a whole section on responding to individuals from an overdose and being, I guess, being cognizant of potential dangers around them. And she said, like, so if you see someone and they're passed out, and, you know, it looks like there could be needles or powder or some sort of substance, don't touch it. Put your gloves on. She said if it's fentanyl in the powder, it's absorbed in your skin, and if you touch it, you could die. She says there are a number of cases where that's happened. Someone came to respond, do CPR or whatever, and they ended up dying too. So you have to be careful, make sure that you're safe if you're going to go in to offer assistance to someone. And I just thought, my God, like what in the, how many people are dying from this if it has changed the way that CPR is taught now? Well, we got to have a whole section on what to do if a white person should overdose in your vicinity. But it reminded me of what I just read from Drugs as Weapons, or what we started with at the beginning, Drugs as Weapons Against Us. Just genocide, chemical and biological warfare specifically, can be enacted against black people in a number of different ways in terms of how whites can carry that out, and to think about that. That section with Paul Robeson, I had forgotten all about that, and that wasn't from that long ago, 2016, when Mr. Patosh was with us. Think about that as we read. Wow. And it's not just him, it's a whole lot of people that he has in that book where he's talking about them doing similar types of things. Jimi Hendrix would be another one. A lot of black people. Dr. Afeni Shakur would be another one. But keep that in mind as we're reading about Paul Robeson. Keep that in mind. This is what whites decided to do, his son as well, from what you heard. Keep that in mind as we're reading. That is the system of white supremacy. That is what domination looks like. That's why I say, hey, let's not use words like white privilege. Let's be accurate. That's terrorism. Chemical and biological warfare. Let's be accurate. Retired firefighter, did you have commentary, sir? Thank you for your patience.
Yes, sir. I was going to give the report on the suspected white interference, because once you started talking after the recording, it was inaudible. But anyway, my first observation of the entire reading was how it's possible for an individual to accumulate a lot of information, a great deal of understanding, and attempt to put it to practice. It just, shows you on the potential, on what under some of the most horrendous atmosphere of terrorism, one has to think of the time that the person known as Paul Robeson was born and grew up and became this global personality. And multiple languages, and a lot of other things that we read in the first report that he was able to do. So I thought that was astounding. CPR. I am a former practitioner of CPR. That if I had $1 for every time that I performed it, I probably would be a little bit more wealthier than what I am today. I would say if a person has gotten to that point, they're probably not going to recover from it. Although it is something that I would wish someone knew how to do. But it's not necessarily successful in most cases. But yes, and the whole idea with the different drugs that are around a person that is in need of CPR, yes, that's definitely something that one has to be cautious of. I was aware of Mr. Robeson's closed up part of his life, but I didn't know for what particular reason other than the global system of racist white supremacy and the idea of them taking away his passport and some other acts of racism. I didn't know that he was chemically injected. I would say, but I did have an understanding. I did hear that a lot. That did happen to a lot of people as a means of a weapon internationally with certain quote unquote threats to the system of racist white supremacy, especially. And last but not least, I did hear from the writer a lot of I would call them right now metaphors to just saying racism, white supremacy. But then again, yeah, I did hear white supremacy once in the first reading, but it was a lot of other metaphors such as apartheid, Jim Crow, that sort of thing. I've heard more than multiple times. And that's my report. Thank you.
Much obliged, retired firefighter. Hopefully we'll get to hear him doing a little narrating down the road. I am not going to read a whole lot because Mr. Robeson doesn't take up the whole book. Drugs as weapons against us. Some idiot does say, sobriety would be best. That's the way he says it. There are a lot of metaphors in the book. Apartheid, Jim Crow, quite a few of them. Segregation. But on page 56, Mr. Patash's book, I don't think I got the cow specifically. I don't think we got a shout out in this one, but we did in his first book, the FBI's war against Tupac Shakur and black leaders. But the paragraph I'll read on page 56, it reads, yeah, we'll just do the one on 56. British intelligence had been looking at Robeson's activities as early as 1935. In 1943, the CIA's predecessor, the Office of Strategic Services, opened a file on him. In 1947, Robeson was nearly killed in a car crash after someone tampered with his car's left wheel. Senator Joseph McCarthy's anti-communist hearings sabotaged his acting and singing career in the U.S. In the 1950s, after Robeson refused to cooperate with the House on Un-American Activities Committee McCarthy hearings, the government blacklisted him. I'll stop there. All of it is important, but that first sentence, British intelligence had been looking at Robeson's activities as early as 1935. I think that's important because it seemed, at least some of what I heard, what I read in the first portion that we covered today, which was just chapter 1, Robeson, and many other black people saying, we're done with the States. We're going to Europe, France, other places here. Russia was mentioned, where racism is not as much of a problem. Didn't say it totally vanished, but we are treated, substantially better here than we are elsewhere. And I've, heard that before. There are many, many black people. Josephine Baker, that's a cowbell. James Baldwin, think that's a cowbell too. It's a pretty lengthy list of black people, and Frederick Douglass going all the way back for a long ways, who have gone overseas or tried to go someplace else to escape white supremacy racism. There is nowhere to go. I think, is it Lee Otley? I have to double check the name, but I think it's Lee Otley. There's a black writer, journalist who actually, I believe, left the United States because of racism, white supremacy during the same time period, 1930s, and went to Germany. Yeah, I mean, talk about confusion being lethal. I mean, global system. Just think that's important in that sentence that I read specifically. British intelligence having a file on him for all of the talk about, democracy and socialism and, giving credit to Britain for the ideas that he had, that he began to develop about politics and what have you. System of white supremacy, which he acknowledged about them being a colonial state, but it may seem that we are being nice and friendly and all of that, but it is a global system. We are all operating with the same fundamental guideline dominating the Negroes worldwide. Very important to keep that in mind. So back to specific notes that I took from Dr. Horne's book. He is a history professor at the University of Houston. Let's see. When he described himself, Robeson, as a Marxist, I had a chuckle and remembered the Grandsister, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. She also described, I think she said Marxist-Leninist. That was how she described herself. I think Dr. Angela Davis had at one point described herself as a Marxist or Marxist-Leninist. All of these different terms where we're still not getting to the root of the problem. White supremacy, racism, particularly when we pick up these theories that are named after other whites. There's supposed to be some sort of partnership with everybody, including individuals classified as white. What does it mean to be classified as white? That is a huge one. Let's see. He says, I had to go abroad to really make it on the big time, and it was abroad that he encountered a new world. I found little color prejudice in Spain. That's where they have the running of the bulls. Dr. Welsing, in the Scandinavian countries, and none at all in the Soviet Union. That may have been the case for him, but racism, white supremacy certainly exists in those areas. Again, that's where they have the running of the bulls with, they're going to do something. Got to chase that black bull, and the meaning of that in terms of white supremacy, racism. Dr. Welsing deconstructed that in the ISIS papers. I think I've even heard Mr. Fuller and many others speak to that directly and how that relates to fear of white genetic annihilation. Certainly even now in the Soviet Union, I have read and seen many, many reports. The same racism, white supremacy, black people being mistreated or talked bad about. So VGQ, one can have a great experience in a location where there are a few black people. That does not mean there's no system of white supremacy. When H.G. Wells, he said he discussed Africa with H.G. Wells, Lasky, Nehru. H.G. Wells being one of the more prominent white writers of that time. I think people still read his books on like science fiction and time travel and all of that. I think that can have a big impact as well. I know if I were able to travel and go to some place like, Australia, New Zealand, something like that, and I had some of the more prominent white people, maybe they're not Americans, but they're still a really prominent, well-known white person, maybe Justin Trudeau, someone like that. He just won re-election and he wants to come and kick it with Gus T. I could see how that would have an impact, a huge impact, especially at this time period with the really aggressive repression and terrorism that he was experiencing here, to then go someplace and have it not be that. I mean, absolutely, I can see how that would have a huge impact and really kind of distort your collective understanding of what it means to be white, which happens to a lot of us when we meet someone who is a suspected racist, but they're courteous. They're nice. They're not calling us names. They might even be helpful to us, so you wouldn't think that they're racist at all. That can be very confusing. Let's see. It was in 1937 that the then affluent Robeson funded the Council on African Affairs, a U.S.-based grouping that crusaded for decolonization of Africa and the Caribbean, with the belief in large part that as this beleaguered continent and region were liberated, citizens there could then pressure Washington to liberate African Americans in turn. Like, wow, that is thinking globally. I think that's pretty impressive. I was going to say for 1937, but that would be kind of impressive for 2019. A lot of times we are not thinking in that sort of global way about how we can try to solve the problem of white supremacy, racism, and linking what's happening globally together in our efforts. That's just not done for the most part. And to have a black organization talking about a decolonization effort in 1930. I mean, my goodness. Danny Glover and company, they got to that later on, right? That's some of that. They have the little stickers against apartheid and some of the Lethal Weapon films that he did in the 80s and 90s and protests and what have you. But wow, that's like 60 years later. I mean, wow, he is ahead of his time, as they say. And then the price that he paid. Now, again, keep in mind, I mean, it's not just money. That's one part, but I mean, your health, where you had chemical and biological warfare. But the price that he paid, I said, his income dwindled from a hefty $104,000 in 1947. I have to do the inflation calculator on that. That's probably $1 million or more in today's finances. To 2 years later, $2,000 or so. Actually, that's a year later to $2,000. What does Mr. Fuller say all the time? Racists, they can give it to you, and then they can take it all back. Racism, white supremacy is way, way substantially more than money. I think that also can confuse a lot of us too. If race soldiers do give us a lot of money on thinking that, oh yeah, maybe it's not racism, or, you know, maybe some other things are going on, that can cause a lot of confusion. We had a reference to one of the most played songs in the history of the Cows, Dixie, play it all the time. And he said, he was talking about New Jersey. Now dig this here. He says, talking about his father was a slave in 1878. He married Mary Louisa Bastille, whose family traced their ancestry as far back as 1608. Princeton, where the couple settled and where Paul was born, was spiritually located in Dixie. Talk about a metaphor. What does that there mean? Spiritually located in Dixie, Robeson recalled later, with the decaying smell of the plantation big house. It was a Jim Crow, meaning apartheid town. Now, look at that. That's exactly, I think that's the best illustration of what retired firefighter just said. Lots of metaphors. Now, I will make sure to include quite a few of these are direct quotes. Spiritually located in Dixie, that's a direct quote. Jim Crow, that's a direct quote. Decaying smell of the plantation big house, that's a direct quote. Apartheid, and that's Dr. Horne's words, but lots of different metaphors for white supremacy, racism. Spiritually located in Dixie. They practice white supremacy in New Jersey too. They practice white supremacy in Boston too. Malcolm X talked about that. They practice white supremacy in Boston too. They practice white supremacy in California too. Global system. Let's see. When they gave the information about being barred from Princeton University, all of that, it came up kind of recently with all of the recent hubbub after Dylan Storm Roof's terrorist activity, when they started talking about maybe we should take down 1 or 5 of these racist monuments. They talked about Woodrow Wilson's tenure at Princeton and his time as president. And this was in the Washington Post. This was in like mainstream newspapers. So they were talking about his efforts to strengthen white supremacy in Washington, D.C., to make it so that black people would have an even more difficult time getting employment. They talked about how he practiced racism when he was governor of New Jersey at a local level. And I think he has either probably buildings or something named after him at Princeton University, since he was president there. That's one of those Ivy League schools, as they say, supposed to be really prestigious. But they were talking about, you know, should he have things named after him? Should these names come down? And wow, this guy was dedicated to racism, white supremacy. And they were using the term white supremacy in some of these more recent reports that were talking about all this, but brought that to mind immediately. Let's see. Christmas came up in this book. We just finished Toni Morrison's Tar Baby, and Christmas was such a huge component of that book. I think we've read a number of books over the years. Minister Malcolm X, I believe, talking about Christmas. 12 Years a Slave, Solomon Northup talking about Christmas and what a big event that was on the plantation. Just think that's one of those that's kind of important to be mindful of, to see how this holiday, white Jesus, inextricably linked to white supremacy, racism, how this holiday comes up in so many different books, and then what is described when it does come up. What are the people talking about? What are the themes? What are the patterns? Are they happy about this celebration? Is it work? Is it just another day? Are they going to get in trouble for stealing apples? What's going to happen around this holiday? Robeson says, on my Christmas in my childhood, Christmases were not so happy because I usually spent them with the neighbors or cousins while my father had to go to other towns to preach. I used to feel that I was an outsider. That came up explicitly in the last book. We had our caller, I believe it was Henry in Chicago, who talked about loneliness, and that theme coming up again here, being lonely, and him being kind of a recluse towards the end of his life after being poisoned. Being alone, being isolated, that is very common system of racism, white supremacy, and the religion of white supremacy. His Christmases being alone or with strangers because his dad had to go out. It's white Jesus' birthday. You got to go out and give those sermons. Big holiday. Um, I remember I remember one Christmas morning going into church, and a certain song made a deep impression on me and cheered me up quite a bit. The song was "Get On Board, Little Children." Music is powerful, and churches, I think, understand that. So that's why they have a lot of song singing and such. Let's see. His interest in language, I think, so important too. I think paying attention and studying the way that words are used and studying language can be super beneficial, a lot more so than just watching television. You can probably study language just watching television. I've heard quite a few folks who that's how they learned a language. In fact, was watching television that was in a language they were trying to learn, and just watching it that way, and they were off and running. So if Mr. Robeson was able to study and do all of this learning of all these exotic languages at a time when he didn't have a smartphone, didn't have Wi-Fi, then, oh man, we should be able to do quite a bit. Let's see. Says besides music and language, the youthful Robeson also developed a keen interest in sports. During his first year in college, he sought to join the American football team, which brought a sharp introduction to racist violence. No pussyfooting there. One boy slugged me in the face and smashed my nose, just smashed it, he said, with equal amounts of wonder and anger. The injury provided trouble to me as a singer every day since, he lamented. Man, I will say again, they should go ahead and get rid of football. All of the gruesomeness he described, them stomping on his hand on purpose, trying to break the bone, ripping off the nail, all of the nails on his hand, even the nose thing. I've been injured with my singing career. I have to deal with this nose injury every day, and I'm going to go out and play football for that? No, thank you. I'm good. You can leave all that alone and destroy. Get me some more brain damage. Give me brain damage in a variety of different ways. Have me go out here and run my head into somebody else, and then you're going to drug me once I come off the field. I'm totally good. Totally good. They can get rid of football. Boxing too. Let's see. Oh, and he said his father convinced him not to quit. In an early lesson that buoyed him throughout life, his sainted father convinced him not to quit, since he should see himself as not just an individual, but also as a representative of all Negroes. So I stayed. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I think a lot of times we end up enduring a lot of abuse. And yeah, I think sometimes I'm not sure if it is worth the price. With some of the things that he did and sacrifices he made, absolutely. But to play football, I guess certainly having 2020 in this one with, I don't know how many, almost a century of black people playing football, and we still got the same problem. I'm good. I think we don't need any other black people to go out and destroy their bodies and their health with the hope that that might somehow help us solve the problem. It has not done that after 100 years. I don't think that's going to work. In fact, I think they'll just play more. In fact, they played Dixie during some of the football games. I think they had to fuss at them in Mississippi to get them to stop playing that song during the halftimes. And South Carolina, quite a few universities. Let's see. Last one I'll get in. Mr. Robeson confessed that American football was his favorite. Perhaps it was because of the roughhouse tactics, which toughened him helpfully for future battles, that endeared him, though in basketball, too, a reporter noticed that every time he was near the basket, at least two of the opposing players were on top of him, and inexorably he was knocked down. They say basketball is supposed to be no contact. Isn't that a flagrant foul? Isn't that what they call it? I hear this frequently, the notion that somehow a black person enduring torture, abuse, punishment of some sort, slavery sometimes they'll even say, has made us stronger. That's why we can get around on the football field and do all of these miraculous things, or that's why Mahalia Jackson sounds the way that she does. That's the explanation as to why all of these things can take place. That's why Jackie Robinson too, but that's why Mr. Robeson is so talented athletically and otherwise, because, of everything that he had to endure. I think that is absolute nonsense. You do not become abused. I don't think anybody here, maybe some of you do, but that is not logical to me to think, as a result of someone coming and breaking your nose, you are going to be better at anything. I cannot imagine how that's going to improve your quality of life or make you better at something. I cannot imagine for anybody like, let me stomp on your hand, break every bone in your finger or in your hand, or at least I'm going to try to. And I think that's going to build some character. Calluses too, but it's going to build some character. You're going to be a better person. That's nonsense. Vernelia Randall said that when she was on the program a decade ago. She wrote Dying While Black, and she said exactly what I said. That whole idea is hogwash, that generally speaking, these type of traumatic injuries, that they generally make you weaker. You have to heal and recuperate for them. And sometimes you don't even heal. But that's what he said. He said he didn't even heal correctly. He had that injury for the rest of his life. He would go out and try to sing and had to deal with that. So I would, at minimum, I would encourage people to be mindful, because that line of thinking is so common. And I think that it's so poisonous, because there is no form of mistreatment that is good for you. We're in a system of terrorism that's designed to abuse black people. All of the thinking should be about stopping abuse. No form of abuse is going to make me stronger or a better person. Me being in a system of justice, that would make me a really strong and tough person. Mr. Fuller talked about that all the time. They'll talk about black people being really strong and really tough, and invariably what they mean is, wow, these niggers can take a lot of punishment. I think that is a super dangerous metric to judge strength. How much abuse you can take, how much of a beating I can put on you. I'll stop there. If other folks have comments, questions, observations, the number again, 605-313-5164, the code 564-943#. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Any other thoughts, observations? Folks want to make sure they get in on Chapter 1, our first session on Dr. Gerald Horne's, Paul Robeson, the artist as revolutionary. Everybody satisfied for our first audio segment?
I had my mute on, and I didn't realize it. But yes, there's to add on to your list of people who were adopting Marxism and socialism, things of that nature. I can recall Dr. Welsing being chided. This is something that she brought up. Being chided by a elder relative. I think when she came home from college, and I forgot the quote that she made, but it was something to regard by the elder relative, that she was chiding her. We spend money for her to go to college, and this is what she learns, that sort of thing. Also, the Black Panther Party sold the Red Book. I think that was Mao Zedong's philosophy, which was similar to Marxism, socialism. And when I was a part of an organization down here in South Florida, and we went about, quote unquote, organizing, not directly against the system of racist white supremacy. The term was called liberation of black people, whatever that means. We were always hounded by white people with that philosophy. They were always around. Some white female with hair underneath her arms telling us about this particular type of understanding. Malcolm X, when he was fired out of the Nation of Islam, experimented with the philosophy also. So it was quite, and it still is to a level. It still is to a level, not as great as it was during Paul Robeson's time, but it still is prominent. I put it that way. But I was impressed with the first reading about the amount of energy that he put towards learning, and basically my practice in football was to encourage the use of platform, because that's where a lot of black males are at, to encourage them to broaden their understanding. You use that platform to be able to do that, especially with the transition from high school to college, where they're paying you tens of thousands of dollars. Take fully advantage of it. Take full advantage of it. Being that that's what they are doing. And Paul Robeson was the epitome of that, in my view, as far as what the possibilities a quote-unquote student athlete can be. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Much obliged, retired firefighter. Let's see. If any other folks have a hand up, any thoughts, observations you want to share before we begin on Chapter 2, you should go ahead and get a hand up. We will have cowbell. In fact, I don't think I have ever inserted an actual cowbell in the audio segment while we were doing a reading for the book club, but it almost happened this week. I paused for a moment, said, no, this is the book club, won't do it, but cowbell, absolutely, could have been there during our second segment. We're in Chapter 2. We will not get to finish Chapter 2. It's a little bit lengthy, but, we'll pick up, get the rest of it for next Thursday. But somebody else have commentary? Assume folks are good. I will assume folks are satisfied. If you have additional comments, questions you would like to share, just make a note. We should have ample time once the second audio segment concludes. Again, this is Dr. Gerald Horne, Paul Robeson, The Artist as Revolutionary. We're picking up at the very beginning of Chapter 2. This is the context of white supremacy. Look out for those metaphors. We'll see if that trend continues. Look out for the metaphors for racism, white supremacy. Chapter 2, Rising Star. As Paul Robeson was leaving Rutgers in 1919, African Americans were being subjected to ghastly pogroms as soldiers, having risked their lives in Europe during the Great War, were at times slain in their uniforms, a reminder that they should not think that their blood sacrifice would bring rights. There was fear that the relative equality experienced by these young men in Europe, particularly France, would embolden them upon their return, and they must be compelled to abandon this course. Such burdensome thoughts hung ominously in the air as Robeson entered Columbia Law School, a prestigious institution that sat uneasily adjacent to Harlem, an iconic community that had attracted in recent years a large black population, particularly from Jamaica,
Barbados, and Trinidad. Also to be found in this vicinity was Eslanda Good, a young woman of African and Spanish Jewish background who had become attracted to him. Part of this circle was Raymond Pace Alexander, who later became one of the leading jurists in Black Philadelphia. He and Robeson met as early as 1918 at a track meet in Pennsylvania, and the skilled attorney said they became fast friends. We had several classes together at Columbia, he recalled, and in 1921, the future Miss Robeson was his guest at a picnic at one of the famous steamers of the Hudson River Line, on which occasion I introduced Essie to Paul. Robeson and Eslanda were smitten, and in August 1921 decided to wed, and despite rockiness, they were to remain married until her death in 1965. They were a kind of odd couple. He was tall, well over 6 feet high, and over the years carried a fluctuating weight that at times tipped the scales at 250 pounds. She was much shorter, and not a minor detail in color-obsessed U.S., she was much lighter than her darker-skinned husband, which at times allowed her access where he was barred. Exuding confidence, she described herself in 1942 definitively. I am 45 years old, weighing 125 to 135 pounds, am 5 feet 4.5 inches tall, and on the sturdy side with powerful shoulders and chest. I was a swimmer and still am muscular, olive-colored, with very black hair, speak a little French, some German, a very little Russian. To earn income, Robeson played professional American football for the Milwaukee Badgers, where he excelled on the field as he had done at Rutgers. His son, Paul Jr., observed that Robeson was billed by the media as the greatest defensive end in the history of football, an opinion confirmed by the premier analyst of the sport, Walter Camp. Their first home was established in Harlem, 321 West 138th Street, a rather small, incommodious abode on the top floor of a private home. The responsibility of marriage and the felt necessity for added income had led him back to the football field and also to unlimber his performing talent, this time as an actor in New York City. As with so many of his capacious ventures, he was encouraged, if not pushed, in this direction by his ambitious spouse. Our early married life was a struggle, said Robeson subsequently, and added pointedly that if his spouse had not gently propelled him, he would not have gone as far. When I was working my way through law school, he told the BBC subsequently, the couple suffered from a lack of cash, so we'd arrange summer concerts and get in an audience at $1 a head. That helped to pay the rent and the grocery bills. At this juncture, Robeson hardly realized that he could make a decent living as a full-time performer. By his own admission, he was mighty worried about paying my way. I've done a couple of amateur plays, but I know nothing about acting. Then a guy comes along and tells me that Mary Hoyt Weiberg has written a play called Taboo, and they're looking for a Negro actor. He was to play opposite the famous English actress Margaret Wycherley. Well, I happen to know her dresser, and I got the part. It was this play, he informed the BBC, renamed Voodoo, which brought me to England, for when he began the rehearsals in New York, I knew nothing of the stage. But an elderly Negro coached me in every line and in every movement. Without him by my side, he revealed, I would never have made the grade, and his name was Alex Rogers, who also happened to be a talented lyricist. This may have been a case of false modesty, a trait for which Robeson could be accused, since a Manhattan newspaper echoed the sentiments of many when it asserted that Robeson dominates the play.
But as so often happened for Robeson and other African American artists, it was when this play debuted in London that his career accelerated. For as with academia and singing and sports, Robeson also excelled in acting to the point that he attracted the increased attention of London impresarios, and by 1922 he was sailing eastward from New York. I shall never forget, said Robeson, arriving in Southampton, I thought I had never seen any land as beautiful, green, and companionable. I longed to fling myself flat upon my face and hug the cool earth. I've always felt that way, he confessed, about the south of England. This was his first welcome to the land where I was to spend so many happy years, and it did not disappoint, as the people were so kind, I sensed none of the prejudice I had left. It was during this sojourn that Robeson developed a taste for football, soccer in the U.S. Subsequently, he was asked in Edinburgh, "Do you ever go to football matches in Britain?" He responded with eagerness, "As often as possible." The first big game I ever saw over here was Celtic vs. Hibs at Glasgow in 1922. Britain made a lasting impression on him and vice versa. As his acting attracted favorable notice, this visit sharpened his understanding of Jim Crow apartheid in the U.S. as it deepened his appreciation of Britain. Later, while visiting Edinburgh, he was asked, "Have you ever been refused rooms in hotels in the USA because of your color?" His answer was unequivocal. Often. Then he was asked, "Have you ever been refused rooms in British hotels because of your color?" The answer was similarly unsparing. No, but it has happened to other colored peoples less well known than I am. He was able to dine in many of London's leading restaurants, but while starring in theater in downtown New York, he found it hard to find a decent meal despite the profusion of eateries there. There were restaurants and other establishments from which he was barred, just as a traveler he could not secure suitable seats on trains because of Jim Crow laws. But then it was London that was the primary focus of his emerging career. Reminiscing later, Robeson observed that the first song I sang in England was "Go Down Moses," which was way back in 1922. Noting the offbeat play in New York called Voodoo that had brought him to the east bank of the Atlantic, he derided it, saying it wasn't much of a play and I wasn't much of an actor, which was all too self-deprecating. During the play, I was supposed to fall asleep and dream. While I was dreaming, I hummed "Go Down Moses" to myself, and the producer said, "Sing it." I did. Then he was told, "Sing another," and by the time the play closed, I was singing several spirituals, and thus was launched the singing career of a man who became notorious because of his powerful voice. Arguably, it was London that opened the doors wide for his talent to emerge, for it is questionable if he would have been able to flourish on the West Bank. That led to a tour where we stayed in digs and I made many friends with many people in all walks of life. Thus began what I feel has been a lifelong friendship with the British people. I love their music, their traditions, and folk songs, since the Scottish, Welsh, and Irish songs appeal to me very deeply and I love to sing them. That this mutual attraction emerged almost accidentally was serendipitous for all sides. Later on, Robeson added more texture to how his singing career began. When I was a young man in Harlem, he told the BBC, I sang for a short time with a group of singers led by a youngster from Portuguese East Africa, meaning Mozambique. He studied at Columbia University and married an American girl. He graduated from Columbia in 1923,
then worked for a law firm but curtly departed after a secretary, in a racist slight, refused to type his letters. Perhaps if he had not endured such slights, he would have considered a legal career, but such was not to be. His budding stardom as an actor at once shielded him to a degree from racism in Britain, but was insufficiently blinding to obscure the reason why. This was the more impressive since, in many ways, Robeson's global popularity began in Britain. He was also pushed in that direction by his unfortunate experiences at home. Whatever the case, it did not take long for him to attract the attention of the heralded playwright Eugene O'Neill. In early 1923, the Irish-American writer was told that Robeson was desirous to meet you in regard to a part in your new play. Further, O'Neill was told, if you have a Negro part to cast, you will find that Mr. Robeson has, in my opinion, very unusual and extraordinary ability as an actor and most admirable qualities as a student and a man, all of which proved to be true. Indeed, Eslanda Robeson concluded that the Provincetown Players, a U.S. theater troupe closely associated with the Nobel laureate, were really responsible for Paul's choice of the stage as a career. For upon meeting their boozy, somewhat irascible O'Neill and the younger Thespian would talk for hours on end, for days, for weeks, said Miss Robeson. For the favorable reviews in London led to his breakthrough appearance in O'Neill's The Emperor Jones in New York in 1923 and London thereafter. This play was not embraced warmly by all. Assuredly, it was denounced by the organ of the then rising Jamaican activist Marcus Garvey, who sought to build a global alliance of Africans and African descendants. It was a depiction of a fictional Caribbean isle and, said the Negro World, was a travesty on the Negro race. The popular U.S. Negro columnist J.A. Rogers told his many readers that the play was written for morons, while the filmed version made him feel like making a dive for the garbage can after seeking it. Robeson, who played the eponymous leading character on stage and screen, was to see this work repeatedly flayed, and, ultimately, his difficulty in finding roles that matched his developing political consciousness led him to stray from cinema particularly. If Robeson had been able to skim O'Neill's innermost thoughts, he may have given more credence to some of Garvey's more astringent evaluations. For in private correspondence, the playwright confessed after hearing Robeson sing, "I'm about fed up with Negro spirituals," then went on to discuss the now prominent performer acting in one of his plays with a constructed face white that could be designed for him and his face built up to fit it. White folks make up to play Negroes, and there's no reason why the reverse shouldn't be practiced. He's the only actor who can do the laughter. That's the important point. It would be good showmanship, too. No end to the publicity it would attract. Yet again, Garvey's journal was countered by what was becoming one of Robeson's chief defenders. London's New Statesman advised about his controversial play, "You ought to see it because of Mr. Paul Robeson in the leading part. I have nothing but admiration for his performance," said their critic John Shand, "since where he was good, he was magnificent. His voice intelligent, physique and sense of the stage immediately made me want to see him in Othello, the play that catapulted Robeson into the theatrical stratosphere." As so often happened with African American artists, these favorable British reviews
were leveraged for gain in the U.S. itself, in this instance, Opportunity, the organ of the National Urban League, which catered to the millions of African Americans then fleeing the terror of the former slave South for points northward, their critic hailed Robeson's fine and impressive acting while quoting at length from 9 equally favorable British reviews. Strikingly, the mainstream U.S. periodical, the Saturday Review, said that Robeson in this play has many moments that are superb and one rarely sees so fine a physique upon the stage. And, besides, Robeson can act with the whole of his magnificent frame. The play was made into a movie, though, interestingly, the positive reviews of his performance applied mostly to the former rather than the latter. For at least cinematically, the critique of the Emperor Jones was understandable. Robeson's character is depicted as cunning, intelligent, and resourceful. As a Pullman porter, a segregated post generally reserved for Negro men, he is exposed to stock market tips and other inside information which he exploits for personal gain. The denouement occurs in the jungle, where the Robeson character perishes after a rebellion of his black subjects. The work was seen as powerful and plausible, and the box office concurred, as the film did well in Harlem and elsewhere, though contemporary audiences might wonder what the fuss was about, given the stodginess of the acting and plotting. Robeson, too, was unhappy with the cinematic version of O'Neill's play. It was a failure on many levels, he opined. Why? Partly because scenes in it were changed around from the proper psychological order of the play. Moreover, the director had some fool notion that Negroes had moods and could only play when they were in the proper mood. Such sour experiences were to drive Robeson away from cinema, but he left reluctantly for at least 2 reasons. Film, along with recordings, allowed him to reach into every nook and cranny globally, and, besides, it was quite lucrative, a factor which was to grow in importance as he began to subsidize various political causes. Robeson's spouse lauded the theatrical version of this work, confiding to her diary after the Manhattan opening that Paul was superb. Applause and stomping and whistling was deafening after final curtain. Paul got 5 curtain calls. The leading Negro actor, Charles Gilpin, was among the celebrities present, poised to welcome Robeson to their ranks. Gilpin and O'Neill quartered down in the dressing room after the play, doubtlessly dissecting Robeson's performance and his bright future prospects. O'Neill and Mrs. O'Neill both seemed thrilled with Paul's performance, as did others who were poised to propel him to stardom. But working with O'Neill inadvertently opened another door for Robeson, through which he strode boldly. The script of the play called for him to whistle in the forest to keep up my courage, he recalled later, and since I cannot whistle, I had to sing instead, an accidental performance that stunned those assembled, contributing to yet another career as a singer. Still, any hearing Robeson's resonant baritone voice could easily have suggested that he should pursue a career as a concert singer. But Robeson's dilemma was captured when another O'Neill play in which he starred, All God's Chillun Got Wings, which touched upon the ultra-sensitive issue of so-called mixed-race liaisons, also met with protest. Robeson played the spouse of an abusive white woman. The Ku Klux Klan, the terrorist and racist gang which held sway in a number of state capitals, was fiercely outraged because of the explosive theme. The atmosphere for this work was not ideal. Robeson recalled later how the New York theater was picketed because a lot of angry citizens felt it was wrong to present a play in which a white woman was married to a Negro. This rattled Robeson. I was never sure I wouldn't be beaten up when I came out of the subway on my way to the theater. What unnerved Robeson was his perception of his own inadequacies. Now, I'm not an actor, you know. Oh, no, I'm not, he insisted. And to work with Flora Robson, a standout of the British stage, was a revelation, since she had all the technique of the great actress, but it was quite unobtrusive. It was so flowing that one wasn't conscious of it as a technique, which is one definition of great acting. I'll never forget, he continued, the opening night. After all, we'd been rehearsing for some time, and I should have been prepared, but I hadn't realized that she had something in reserve. We came to that scene where she stands behind me with a dagger and spits out that one terrible, obscene word, nigger. And on the opening night, she did it with such intensity that I nearly shot out of my skin. I was really frightened. But, as was typical of his BBC interviews, keen to draw distinctions between Britain and the U.S., he was asked, was it different here in London? Yes, responded Robeson, it was very different in terms of a dearth of tension and a lesser amount of unease about miscegenation, not to mention an absence of picketing. Soon the young actor was huddling with other bright lights from the theater, as recounted by his spouse. Paul had a most interesting visit from Kerensky, the Russian critic and collaborator with the famous Stanislavski. He is to give Paul a lesson regularly in the art of acting, says he thinks Paul is a great artist and just needs a little technique, and thus they will go over Othello together, soon to be Robeson's stellar stage role. We are stunned by the good fortune, she said. Their fortune improved even more dramatically when the couple, she was effectively his manager, concluded arrangements with Oscar Micheaux, the prolific African-American auteur and producer for Paul's film, made satisfactory contract for 3% gross after the first $40,000 the picture brings in. Salary $100 for 3 weeks. Robeson did work with Micheaux, but then a major film studio in Southern California called Promising the Moon. We have a fine chance of putting through a big picture deal for you, he was told. Paul, this new film will give you a tremendous opening if your first picture makes a hit. So do try to see that your first picture is sound commercially. Unartistic failure may be all right on the stage, but it helps no one in pictures. As things turned out, Robeson's record in movies was mixed, with his critically panned first sound film, The Emperor Jones, being typical of his cinematic reception. Nevertheless, ever more lucrative offers continued deluging the Robesons, as shall be detailed below, many of which were accepted. One manager, Miss Robeson noted, made a most attractive proposition to me in that he wants to take over Paul for exclusive management for 2 years with an option, and to sweeten the pot, he would advance $10,000 cash to Paul. She was bedazzled by this offer, terming it a huge attraction. Just on the compensatory call-in this past weekend, I played a portion where Oscar Micheaux, they were playing some of his films in at a film festival right here in Seattle. That was just a couple days ago. Anywho, we are still in chapter 2, a little bit shorter than our normal segment. We would normally have about, 15 minutes, maybe a little more of audio. Stopping here for this week. We will resume next week, rotating the narration. Hopefully Gus T will not be doing the narration for next week. This is Dr. Gerald Horne, Paul Robeson, the artist as revolutionary. If you have thoughts, questions to share, the number 605-313-5164, the code 564
943 press star 61 if you would like to participate. If we have any folks who have seen Emperor Jones or All God's Chillin' Got Wings, feel free. Or if you read the play, we might have some literary students who are listening in. Please share. I've not seen or read either of these works. We just heard Paul Robeson being in these plays of Mr. O'Neill, white man suspected racist. I'm just reading the synopsis, the very common one that you will find on Wikipedia. I think they're acceptable for this sort of thing, and it seems to match what is on other pages, or at least a few other pages. So the synopsis or the summary reads: The Emperor Jones is a 1920 play by American dramatist Eugene O'Neill that tells the tale of Brutus Jones, a resourceful, self-assured African-American and former Pullman porter who kills another black man in a dice game, is jailed, and later escapes to a small, backward Caribbean island where he sets himself up as emperor. The play recounts his story in flashbacks as Brutus makes his way through the jungle in an attempt to escape former subjects who rebelled against him. I could see why white people would like such a play. Brutus Jones, that's Mr. Robeson's character. And then All God's Chillin' Got Wings, 1924, is an expressionist play by Eugene O'Neill about miscegenation, sexual intercourse between a white person and a non-white person, inspired by the old Negro spiritual. He began developing ideas for the play in 1922, emphasizing its authenticity in his notes. Based play on his experience as I have seen it intimately. O'Neill wrote the play in the fall of 1923 and revised the text only slightly for its 1924 publication. Arguably one of his most controversial of plays, it starred Paul Robeson in the premiere, in which he portrayed the black husband of an abusive white woman who, resenting her husband's skin color, destroys his promising career as a lawyer. All God's Chillin' Got Wings. Anywho, that would be the play. He said the Klan protested, whites were furious. They have a section on the Wikipedia page for this that Mr. Robeson kissed the hand of a white woman in this play, and audiences were aghast. And what? Let that coon touch that white woman, we'll burn this place down, which they easily could have done in 1924. Anyway, if folks have thoughts, observations, again, if anyone has seen or read any of these plays, that would be interesting to note. But if you have other questions, thoughts to share, feel free. If we have any folks, if you didn't get to share at all during the first audio segment and you think you might want to participate, definitely get your hand up. Don't wait until the last minute to speak up. Retired firefighter, Drapetomania, anything you wanted to share?
I have watched parts of both film, but I don't really recall enough of it to be able to articulate it. You can, I believe, you can view them. They can be viewed on YouTube easily, because I think that's where I've done it at. Because I have, when I do watch something other than a documentary, it normally is something that is, I guess, to younger people, a very old movie. I was, for a long time, have always been curious about Paul Robeson, and not only because he was a quote unquote great athlete, but there, it was some more things centered around him. I mean, because there's plenty of black males who are quote unquote great athletes, but he had more of an attachment to him than just a great athlete. And through that, I, did some self-study and came across those two movies. His background, Jim Brown's background, has some similarity. I'm pretty sure that there was a lot of white males who had an envy for him automatically. The same white males had with Jim Brown also, because of their quote unquote athletic prowessness, and both of them had some interests outside of just being a quote unquote gladiator. Although I never heard Jim Brown do any singing, but he did some acting. And both of them were quite comfortable in walking away from the sport as a professional, which I greatly admire out of black male athletes to do, which they don't do enough, in my opinion, as though their capacity is limited to entertaining people with their physicality. And Mr. Robeson certainly had an understanding that he was much more than just a good quote unquote athlete. And one thing I need to get coached on is the process of doing the reading on recording. Now, on my phone, I found a voice recorder app, and I think I have an understanding on how to use it, but how do I send that information to you?
It's generally pretty simple. I can chat it up with you off the air and figure out a method.
Yeah,
but
that's what I need. That's what we need. I need to do that.
Oh yeah, that is no problem at all. That should be, like I said, it's if you remember, or if anybody remembers the days when they had the actual cassette, the little mini ones or the gigantic one, and you just press record. It is about the same. Once you,
I know that part.
Oh yeah, and the sending too. That's really easy as well. They have so many options. Like, oh yeah, that's a breeze. Like, I can happily.
What I mean by who I send it to. Do I send it to your Facebook? Do I send it to?
That's what I mean. All of that is super easy, and be happy to chat it up with you off the air to go over all those details.
All right.
Very simple.
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm. If other folks have questions, thoughts, hand up, we'll hear from you. I'm going to go back to All God's Chillin' Got Wings, to have a white man who picks some Negro song and say, oh yeah, I'm going to make a play based on these Negroes' carol. And I already told you what the play is about. We got a black male being sexually sewered by a white woman. And the black male is an attorney, which Mr. Robeson wanted to be. It said we got that in the section this week, workplace racism, where he maybe could have pursued a law career. He was trained at Columbia. But this white woman refuses to write his letter, and so he resigns. He quits. And so this white man writes this play where Robeson's character is married to this white woman, and she ruins his law career. That's the plot. I had never heard of this the song or the play before today. So I'm looking at more of the information about what this play is about. And Retired Firefighter is correct.
you can go on like YouTube and see, Emperor Jones or this one as well. Maybe that's homework if somebody wants to research for next week. But so I'm reading, and it gives more information about the characters. So it says Ella, that's the white woman. She is uncomfortable being Jim's wife and wants to control him throughout the play. Classic racist white woman. Now, the next character, Shorty. Shorty is Ella's childhood friend. That's the white woman. A white gangster who offers Ella work as a prostitute. Wait a minute. I thought Paul Robeson's character is a black male, an aspiring attorney. How is his wife some scoundrel with gangster friends, hooligans who are trying to get her to be a prostitute? Like, what kind of... I continue reading, so the next character is Mickey, Ella's childhood friend. He is a boxer who leaves Ella after she becomes pregnant with his child. And wait a minute, so this is a white woman. Maybe she was a prostitute, could be a prostitute. They're asking her to be a prostitute, her white gangster friends. Another white man, no count boxer, has gotten her pregnant and absconded, deadbeat dad. And so a black attorney is the one who comes along and like, what kind of nonsense? Like that sort of pattern. That's the same type of thing with Sidney Poitier, Cowbell. And I said that last week. How is it that you can't read a book? I said that last week exactly. I said fiction, nonfiction. It doesn't matter. How is it that you can't read a book that doesn't involve some aspect, blackmail, raping a white woman, killing a white woman? Some aspect of it has got to be mixed in there. And boop, we already got there this week, and more of that to come. But it's the same pattern in Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, where Sidney Poitier's character is a doctor, I believe. He's a physician in that film. And his white wife or fiance or girlfriend or whatever she is, she doesn't even have a job. She's just, a nobody. She's just white. That's it. It's even worse here. A prostitute, child, no count criminal gangster, and we got an aspiring attorney, and she sabotages all of that. Like, what in the world? This is coming up at Training Day. Denzel Washington, since he was mentioned in the book. All God's chillins got wings. Let's see. What other notes did I take from this portion? I thought it was interesting. It seemed, at least some of the early portion of the book, because we haven't gotten to the meat of his, what they call activist career, him doing things against racism, white supremacy. A lot of the early portion of the book, since he's spending so much time talking about his time in Europe and these plays that he's doing with white playwrights and white authors and people that he's talking to, it seems like a lot of white validation and, these white relationships that I have and white authors that I'm reading that are helping me to become a Marxist and a socialist. Like, it seems like a lot of white identification, a lot of white validation. And his wife, Eslanda, she writes, these are her words. Let's see. I'm 45 years old, weighing 125 to 135 pounds and 5 feet 4.5 inches tall, and on the sturdy side with powerful shoulders. Olive colored. I thought that was interesting. Could be, accurate description. Very black hair. Speak a little French, some German, a very little Russian. These are languages that are generally associated with white people. Certainly having some expertise with language. I don't speak any French or any German or any Russian, or any languages that are associated with black people. But it does seem like some level of white identification, and he had already, Dr. Horne had already described her as being lighter complexion, which allowed her access to some areas where Mr. Robeson was denied because he's darker. Another example of that black male privilege. Let's see. It said it talked about their marriage, And it says that they remained married until her death in 1965, and they got married in August of 1921. I think that it's important that these seem to be two people who spent a lot of time working against racism, white supremacy, talking about racism, white supremacy in some manner. That may have contributed to them being able to hang on despite the rockiness. But I thought that was important because in the system of racism, white supremacy, it's going to be rocky, like guaranteed. Like doesn't matter how much wealth you have, what your income level is, any of that. It's designed to be rocky because we are in the system of white supremacy. That is the motivation for solving this problem immediately. Let's see. Even the names of some of the plays, they say with, he was, I guess, given a break. They say, done a couple amateur plays, but I know nothing about acting. Then a guy comes along and tells me that Mary Hoyt Weiberg has written a play called Taboo, and they're looking for a Negro actor. Like even that, like the word taboo, I'm going to give the dictionary, is generally something forbidden. Let's see, a social or religious custom prohibiting or forbidding discussion of a particular practice or forbidding association with a particular person, place, or thing, like niggers. That's what I mean. Like, you know, and then they got sex, social practice that is prohibited or restricted, speaking about sex is taboo in this country, or talking about sex with niggers. But again, it's the same type of degrading display of black people that's so common even right now as we're right on the border of 2020. Let's see. When he first arrived, and this is what I mean about white validation, he says when he first arrived in England, first welcome to the land where I was to spend so many happy years, and it didn't disappoint. The people were so kind. I sensed none of the prejudice that I had left. This is monument, if you want to say colonialists. These are super colonialists, racists, white supremacists, whether we want to talk about the era of enslavement, if we want to talk about their conduct on the continent and divvying up so-called colonies, whichever way that we want to, you know, analyze their conduct in the Caribbean. Racist white supremacists, again, they can be nice and pleasant. You coming to visit for a little while, oh yeah, you know, visiting Negro, how nice. Whites do the same thing here. Sometimes they can be very, very nice to black people who are born outside the states. That can be the case sometimes. Sometimes not so much. Marcus Garvey did get deported, as they say. I just mentioned him graduating from Columbia in 1923. I believe that's another Ivy League school. Worked for a law firm. White woman didn't want to write his letter. Maybe he could have been an attorney. And that's the play that we get, this shabby concoction with a white prostitute gangster with a child from a previous white man, deadbeat dad. Let's see. His breakthrough appearances in Emperor Jones, that's the one where a black male kills another black male and runs off to some made-up island in the Caribbean. I did appreciate hearing that apparently, I guess a lot of black contemporaries thought that this was a travesty as well, because that's what it sounds like from reading the description. J.A. Rogers and others, Marcus Garvey as well, saying, oh man, this, you know, does not look constructive at all, and I shouldn't have seen it, which is generally how I feel anytime there's a production that has a sizable number of black people in the cast, that it's going to be this type of, you know, spectacle. Let's see. Yeah, I'm fed up with Negro spirituals too. Let's see. I don't know, something, if folks have an opportunity to even see some of the movie posters that feature Mr. Robeson, and he's got his military attire playing Emperor Jones. You can kind of, I mean, just in the context of white supremacy, that sort of garb, and particularly with the story that I just told you, that this is someone who's killed a black male, gets jailed, escapes, and runs off to an island to make up that he's going to be king of the Negroes there, and they revolt. And he's trying to escape through the jungle there, and is kind of recounting all this story. But to have him in this regalia, like, yeah, kind of reminds me of Django Unchained in some manner. Let's see. I thought it was interesting as well. It seemed they in Dr. Horne citing some of the reviews of Emperor Jones. Many of these white reviews, the Saturday Review and other periodicals, they talked explicitly about the physique of Paul Robeson, and that just reminded me so much of the Delectable Negro, the Man Knot, and different ways of consuming and sexualizing black male bodies. It seemed like it came out just so many people. They said it repeatedly. He has many moments that are superb, and one rarely sees so fine a physique upon the stage. Yeah, they had quite a few where they just continue to come back and, oh, wait a minute, find a physique on stage, and besides, Robeson can act with the whole of his magnificent frame. There we go. That's why I marked that one particularly, because to have it mentioned twice in such short succession from the same source, the Saturday Review, just that intense focus on the physical body of the black male. And I mean, of this time period, I'm about 95% certain this would be a white man who's authoring this piece. So homoerotic consumption of the black body. Let's see, anything else? Had they said Emperor Jones is powerful and plausible, of course. Niggers killing each other in a dice game, of course. Getting arrested and thrown in jail, of course. Niggers escaping jail, Going to an island and setting themselves up as king, let's see. Got that. Oscar Michaud got that. I think I'm satisfied. At least I got most of the major points I wanted to share. Did other folks, retired firefighter, Drapetomania, any other folks have thoughts, questions to get? Oh, wait a minute. Let's see. Henry in Chicago, we've missed you totally. Did you have thoughts, sir?
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Gus, have you been getting my emails? Because I did send you like a recording of the first chapter just in case you didn't have anything.
Oh man, I missed it. I would have definitely used it. Man, I missed that one. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, I was gonna, I was sending it to you just in case you didn't have, anybody doing it. But I would actually be willing to do some more chapters. Just let me know what, which chapters you need to do.
Woo! Awesome.
But I wanted to comment quickly. I don't have the book in front of me because I'm away. But I read the book, and Robeson, confused just like everybody about racism, because the beginning of the book kind of feels like Robeson thinks that racism just kind of happens in the United States, and later on he might, but I don't think he completely understands that racism is a global thing. Even in the land of Britain, which he, in the first chapter we see that he proclaims, and also Russia too. What was interesting is in this last recording, in the second chapter, when he was playing that role in All God's Children, the woman who played the white woman who played that white wife, Flora Robeson, I think, and she's a British actor. And what was so interesting is how Dr. Horne kind of like displayed how, well, not Dr. Horne, but Robeson kind of believed that she was really acting very good. And I was thinking she wasn't acting. She was playing out what she really was. So I thought that was pretty interesting how that kind of turned out. And like I said, he's confused. We're all confused about, racism. But yeah, I when you're reading it, you're like, oh wow, she's not acting. She's playing out what she really wanted to do. The Emperor Jones, I kind of think, and just like you said, O'Neill, I don't think he's a suspected racist. I think he is a racist for these roles that he gave Robeson to play. The Emperor Jones character kind of seems like a defilement of a previous character Robeson played in his younger days, which got him interested in acting, and that was the character of Toussaint Louverture. You're talking about a black man who was running a Caribbean island. That's kind of Toussaint Louverture's type of situation. So I think that was kind of like a, like I said, it was a defilement of what he previously played, because it's kind of similar to like a Toussaint Louverture character, but in a characterish type of way. So, I kind of thought that was kind of a interesting twist to that. But that's all I have right now in my life.
Thank you so much for the reading. Man, I definitely would have used it, and we will definitely, if you are willing, we'll use your services moving forward. Now we have 2 people down to read. Woohoo! If anybody else wants to read, that is great. Again, this is a short book. It's not lengthy at all, so we are not going to be reading for months or anything like that. We should easily be done before the end of the year. In fact, people, you can be thinking now of, what should we read next? Because it's not very long at all. I think we probably have like another 170 pages or so to go, which is just not much, maybe 4 or 5 weeks. Anywho, retired firefighter, did you have commentary to share? Thank you, Henry in Chicago.
Yes, I was just going to say the white people in Europe had for a long time had entertained their enjoyment with non-white black people as far as entertainers are concerned. And I noticed in the early part of the second reading, it was acknowledged with the idea in mind of, yes, if you are a black person that is known for your entertainment, you probably would gain access to a place to stay in a quote unquote nice restaurant, that sort of thing. But nevertheless, there is a global system of racist white supremacy right there in England and all those other places. White European entertainers, especially in music, have always been influenced by non-white black people, especially non-white black people from this part of the world. I can recall Motown having an alliance with England. The famous group, the Beatles, was deeply influenced by quote-unquote black entertainers. Seattle's own great musician, Jimi Hendrix, couldn't get popular in this part of the world that's called the United States. He actually had to open up with this TV organized group called the Monkees, of all names, which is a Welsing moment. And in turn, he became popular over in England. And that set off his career worldwide. Once his records, I believe, started gaining popularity back over in this part of the world. So I'm just connecting with with what we're reading on what expanded from that actually is in a more recent history about white people that don't reside in this part of the world, but it's in part of the world that's called Europe. Thank you.
Much obliged, retired firefighter. Good point. You're mentioning popular Seattle artists. I thought you were going to mention Quincy Jones. I was like, oh, Jimi Hendrix. Yes. But you have to leave.
Yeah, Quincy Jones also
got to stay and still become popular. That would be another cowbell. But yes, Quincy Jones also, who is doing great things here in Seattle. I think people don't associate either of them with Seattle. Let's see. Any other folks, if you have questions, observations, feel free. 605-313-5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Great point as well. I think others have pointed out that whites sometimes will like to defile a black person if they've shown some black self-respect, really in any area of activity. But if you've done like a film or role that was powerful, important, they want to try to defile you and mess that up somehow. I was thinking Lisa Bonet with the Cosby Show, Bill Cosby, that she was in some role to kind of defile her after she had a really wholesome image with the Cosby Show and then the spinoff and all that. That sort of thing is pretty common. I think that point about Mr. Robeson portraying Toussaint Louverture and really important revolutionary figure going back to the title, to then have him playing this, hooligan who's killing another black person in a dice game and then a convict no argument here. Mr. O'Neill no longer a suspect, racist based on Emperor Jones and All God's Chillin' and whatever other works he's offered. Anything else folks wanted to make sure they get in? Questions, observations from the first section? We've only read about chapter and a half.
Yeah, so far, what I guess, and the whole book is encompassing now is his origins, his background as a quote unquote athlete, and his start as his frustrations of leaving from the his law practice to now pay attention more to his means to entertain. And I guess I can't wait until to get to the part where he's actually working, saying and doing directly towards the global system of race of white supremacy in his own way. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Should be coming up next week. And in fact, you might even get to read some of those portions yourself. So you can have your cake and eat it too, as they say, or eat your cake and have it too. That's it. Eat your cake and have it too. Draftomania, did you have a thought, question you wanted to get in?
Oh, yes. I just wanted to say that I think that Paul Robeson was a genius. I mean, he spoke 20 languages. He practiced law. He was into sports. He was very good at sports, multiple sports actually, good at a bunch of sports, football, basketball, and boxing. He also was a great singer. He was an activist. He also was, what else was he? An actor. So I just think he was phenomenal, and I'm glad that you picked this book for us to read, Firefighter. And I am definitely learning a lot from listening. And I don't have the book. I'm not reading it because I'm reading some books right now on my own. So, but I'm listening and I'm getting a lot out of it. And I thank you for sharing. And that's all I have.
Much obliged. Draftomania, reading is more important than watching television. With that, anything else folks want to share? Our first session on Dr. Gerald Horne's Paul Robeson, the activist or the actor as revolutionary. The artist as revolutionary. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
I think one aspect Paul Robeson does, which could be very used in counter racism, is learning languages, and not just being not just speaking the language, but being very linguistic, because he understood these languages, and I think that would actually help us in understanding, especially the global system, racism, white supremacy, because obviously, if we're going to defeat this problem, or we're going to replace this system of racism with justice, it's going to have to be on a global scale, which means that some of us are going to have to communicate with other people, other non-white people around the world. So I think that's one of the very interesting and intriguing techniques that Robeson has done in regards to counter racism. That's all I have on me, my line.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Being able to use language and communicate effectively with others, and to be able to communicate specifically about the problems of white supremacy, racism, and strategies for solving that problem, solving problems in general. That is super, super important. Minister Malcolm I think that was said, was attempting to do similar things, particularly the latter portion of his life, talking to some of the same people in Crema that were mentioned. But yeah, that is super, super important. Global problem, working globally to find the solution. Anything else? Folks want to make sure they get in.
Last thing, he participated, which I think is important. He participated in quote unquote debating competitions also, I believe, and I think that's very important on how to. One thing is to have some understanding of a particular subject for yourself, but to be able to present it to others and influence and use it as some constructive form of influence is a talent that can be developed, and I think it would be good for people to get involved into that sort of thing, to be able to have a thought and be able to project it or deliver it to whereas if it's constructive, it would be also influential to others. And he was doing that at a very early age. And I think we're going to see it later on in the book.
Much obliged, retired firefighter. Anything else folks needed to get in? I will assume folks are satisfied. We'll pick up next week. I'll email Henry in Chicago and speak with retired firefighter, make sure everything is coordinated. But we'll pick up next week. We'll be kind of midway in Chapter 2. We'll be here tomorrow for neutralizing workplace racism and Saturday for the compensatory call-in. Again, Cal's Yoga Retreat. Deadline today for the deposit. Drop an email if you would like to join us in Florida, 5 days, 4 nights, December 28th to January 1st. Yoga, counter-racism, workshops on healthy meals and counter-racism. Looking forward to starting 2020 in a constructive manner. All the details at the blog, racism-notes.blogspot.com. Again, email with questions if you need more details. I hope it was worthy of your Thursday evening. Much obliged to those who participated. We'll be here in about 24 hours. Sobriety would be best under conditions of white supremacy. Think about what I said at the beginning. In addition to being sober, let's be buckled up every time we are in a vehicle, driver or passenger. If you're driving, not on the cell phone, let's do everything we can to minimize contact with race soldiers. Creator, we ask that you help us remain patient with other black people, victims of white supremacy. We ask that you help us remain patient with ourselves. Remind us to demonstrate the highest levels of black self-respect at all times, in all places, each and every time we are in contact with another black person. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Cal signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.